Hi, I'm Eric Siegel with Eric's Trains, and today we've got a beauty. We're going to be checking out the new 3-rail O-scale Vision Line New York Central 484 Niagara from Lionel. Alright, so here we have the latest addition to Lionel's Vision Line. The Vision Line has been around for about 10 years or so now, and for those of you who don't know, the Vision Line is all about throwing in the kitchen sink as far as features and technology goes. And so when you get a Vision Line engine, it's not going to be cheap, but it is going to be really cool, and it's going to have some features that have never been seen before in O-scale, and that's certainly the case here. But before we talk more about Lionel's Vision Line Niagara, let's talk about the real thing. So, the New York Central 484 Niagara was a steam locomotive named after the Niagara River and Falls. Now, it was a 484 locomotive, so that means it had 4 wheels up front, 8 drive wheels, and then 4 wheels on the trailing truck. Now, the Niagaras came about because by the 1940s, the loads being hauled on the New York Central's main line from New York to Chicago were becoming more than the famous J-class Hudsons could handle. So the New York Central went looking for a new design that could become a workhorse on this route, and they eventually settled on the 484 Niagaras, which were proposed by Alco. Now, although the Niagaras were in some way based upon the successful 484 Northern locomotives used by the Union Pacific, they actually improved upon that design, and as a result, the Niagara is considered one of the most efficient 484 locomotives ever built. A total of 27 Niagaras would be built for the New York Central. All would be retired by the early 1950s, and sadly, all of these beautiful locomotives were scrapped, and so this is one engine that unfortunately was lost to history. So now let's talk about the Vision Line Niagara that we have here. Lionel offered this engine in their 2018 Volume 1 catalog, and it was delivered toward the end of 2018. Now, they did 6 different versions of the Niagara. There's 6001, which is done in the black and silver New York Central paint scheme. There's 6005 that we have here, 6013, 6019, 6023, and then an unpainted pilot version as well. The length of the engine is right at 15 3/4 inches. The length of the tender is right at 12 1/4 inches. The combined length of the engine and the tender together is 28 3/4 inches. The weight of the engine is 8 pounds 11 ounces. The weight of the tender is 4 pounds 10 ounces, and that gives us a combined weight of 13 pounds 6 ounces. This engine has 3 pounds 13 ounces of pulling power, which is pretty darn good for a steam engine. And the minimum curve needed to run this engine is 0.54. Feature-wise, this model starts off with the base features that most high-end Lionel legacy steam engines have these days. It's driven by a large flywheel motor. It has a fan-driven smoke unit for the smokestack and another one for the whistle steam smoke effect. It has Lionel's legacy command system on board, as well as legacy rail sounds, and it also has Bluetooth on board so that you can run this engine from your smartphone using the Lionel Lion Chief app. Now, on top of the base features, you also get the more advanced cutting-edge features that make this into a Vision Line model. So let's go over those. First of all, this model has stereo sound effects. So rather than having just one speaker back in the tender, you've got a speaker up front as well. And in that way, you can have localized sound effects. So when you blow the whistle or sound the bell on this engine, those sound effects are going to come more from the front of the engine than the rear. This is not the first time Lionel has done this. They've done it on several other Vision Line engines, and it's always a very, very cool effect. Up on top of the engine, we've got a brand new smoke effect. In addition to the smokestack and the whistle steam smoke effect, we've now got the safety valve steam effect. These are the safety valves, and the safety valves function as a fail-safe on a steam engine. They open up to prevent excess pressure in the boiler so that the locomotive doesn't explode. And when the safety valves open up, you will see a jet of steam shoot out of the top of the engine. And so when you activate that effect on this model, that's exactly what you see. It's very cool. Connecting the engine and the tender is what Lionel calls the kinematic drawbar. Now, this is not a new feature, and it has been done on a few non-Vision line engines, but it's still pretty cool. Now, the way it works is that the kinematic drawbar works on a spring-type mechanism. And so when the engine is on a straightaway like it is right now, the spring pulls the drawbar in tight and you get a nice prototypical distance between the engine and the tender like we have now. When the engine goes around a tight curve like we typically have in O-scale, the spring lets out a little bit and that increases the distance between the engine and the tender and allows the engine to get around that curve. And then when it straightens back out again, the spring tightens up and you get a nice realistic distance once again. Now we come to the feature on the tender that everybody's talking about, and it's sort of the hallmark feature of the Vision line Niagara, and that of course is the water scoop spray effect. Now, in order to better appreciate this effect, let me explain how the real thing worked. On the real railroads, on steam locomotives, in order to add coal or water to the tender, traditionally they would have to stop the locomotive and add those two items. Well, on the New York Central and other railroads, when they had an express train, either freight or passenger, where they wanted to keep it on schedule and time was a big factor, they devised a way to take on water without having to stop the engine. What they would do is, in between the rails, they would have a big long pan of water. And then on the tender, there was a scoop mechanism that could be lowered down, and the engine would come by at full speed. They would lower down that scoop and water would be forced up into the tender, and in that way they could take on water without having to stop the engine. Now, when the engine took on water in this fashion, it was quite a spectacle for two reasons. First of all, the scoop itself would cause a lot of water to spray out from underneath the tender. And then secondly, on the sides of the tender, they had these overflow pipes. And these served as a safety pressure release system for the water being forced up into the tender. And so in addition to the water spraying off of the scoop, you would have water spraying out of these overflow pipes, and it was quite a scene. And so on this model, Lionel has attempted to replicate this effect. So alongside the other electronics that are normally inside one of these tenders, they've also got a dual smoke unit at work. These two smoke units run double duty, putting smoke out of the overflow pipes on the tender, and so between the two smoke units, they put on quite a show. Now, does it look like real water spray? Well, of course not. The only thing that would look like real water would be real water, but we're not about to start spraying water all over these electric trains, and so they use smoke instead to get a similar effect, and I gotta say, it looks really cool. Unfortunately, I can't demonstrate the spray effect when the engine is sitting still like it is now, because the feature only works if the engine is in motion, and that makes total sense because there's no reason for it to work with the engine at a standstill. So you'll see it in action in just a few minutes when we run the engine. Now, you can activate the spray effect at pretty much any speed, but it looks best when the engine is going at a good clip. The last feature I want to talk about is one that I'm willing to bet at least some people out there have overlooked, and that is the force coupler effect on the rear coupler. Now, to better understand this, let me take a step back for a sec. One of my favorite effects on legacy steam engines has always been the labored sound effects. On the legacy remote, you can increase or decrease the labored sounds depending on how many cars you're carrying. So if you're carrying 30 cars, you can ramp up the labored sound effects, and the engine makes a very labored sound. It's a very hard chuff. It sounds like it's working really hard. If you're not carrying a lot of cars, or if you're bringing the engine to a stop, you can let it drift. You can decrease the labored sound effects. You get a drifting sound, a very airy chuff, and it sounds like the engine is not working near as hard as it was before. Well, when I first got the Vision line Niagara here, I didn't read the instructions, of course. I threw it on the track, started it up, and started running the engine. And I immediately noticed that the labored sound effects buttons on the legacy remote were not working. And there was this moment of panic where I thought, my God, have they gotten rid of this feature? But then I remembered the force coupler effect. The force coupler effect automatically adjusts the labored sound effects for you so that you don't have to do them manually. And the way it does that is there's a sensor in the coupler that senses the load on the coupler. So it can tell if you're carrying 30 cars versus 5 cars versus 0 cars. So if you're carrying 30 cars, it'll sense that and give you a very labored sound. If you're not carrying any cars, it'll sense that too and give you a very non-labored sound. And that's really cool. And of all the features on this Vision Line engine, I actually think this one is the most cutting edge. I know the smoke effects get a lot of the spotlight, but they're just smoke effects. They're just smoke units and piping and so forth. This is really cutting edge, and it's really something that defines the Vision Line, stuff like this. Now, as many of you know, I often do a feature in these review videos called BFIMO, Best Feature in My Opinion. And so my pick for the best feature on the Vision Line Niagara is the force coupler effect, because it so embodies what the Vision Line is really all about. When Lionel started the Vision Line about 10 years ago now, it was all about throwing in the kitchen sink, using cutting-edge technology, and thinking outside the box to do things that had never been done before in O-scale, and the force coupler effect is all of those things. Alright, so the last thing I want to do before we start this thing up and run it around the layout is to show you some of the smoke fill holes and hidden switches and so forth on this model. So up front at the smokestack, in order to load the smoke units that are responsible for the smokestack and the whistle steam smoke effect, you pour the smoke fluid directly down the stack. Right behind that, the top of the sand dome can be removed like that to reveal some master controls for the engine. So right here we've got the run program switch that's used to program the engine into your legacy remote. Below that we've got the on-off switch for the main smoke unit for the smokestack. Below that is the on-off switch for the whistle steam smoke unit. And below that is the on-off switch for the safety pop-off valve smoke unit. And then right here is the volume control for the speaker that's in the front of the engine. Behind that we've got the safety pop-off valves, and to load that smoke unit with smoke fluid you pull this piece out like that, and then you squirt the smoke fluid down into a little hole that's right there in the middle, like that. Now, the process of adding smoke fluid to the dual smoke units inside the tender can be a little tricky at first because it's kind of hard to access until you've had some good practice at it. It's right here on the corner, and they've actually done a really good job of hiding it, but it's right underneath this little chest here. And so the best way to get to it that I found is to put your fingernail kind of on these hinges on the outside and sort of pop it like that. And that'll get it loose, and then you can slide it off like that. And there's the fill hole. Now, when you put smoke fluid down the fill hole, go slowly, because right beneath the surface it makes a right turn really sharp. And so if you fill it too fast, the smoke fluid will overflow and go everywhere. So just take your time and you won't have any problems. And then when you're done, this pops on there like that, and it is held down with a magnet. Lastly, on the back of the tender, if we lift up this hatch, it reveals a couple items. We've got the master volume control for the sound system in the tender, and then we've got an on-off switch for the dual smoke units in the tender. Alright, now comes the fun part. Let's go ahead and power up this puppy.
Yardmaster to NYC 6005, over. 6005 answering. Go ahead, over. Get us set up running. Your train will be ready at 17:30. Over. Roger that. 6005 out.
Okay, first up, let's check out the whistle. And when I blow the whistle, I'm not sure if you'll be able to tell on the video, but some of the sounds will emanate from the front of the engine, and that is those stereo sounds that I was talking about earlier. Anyway, let's check it out. This engine also has a horn, and you can toggle between the whistle and the horn using the aux 1 key on your Legacy or TMCC remote. Up next, here's the bell. The next thing I want to show you is the safety valve steam effect. So when I activate that, you'll see steam shooting out of the pop-off valves right over here. Now, the effect will activate automatically at times to give the engine a realistic look, but you can also activate it manually by pressing the aux3 key on the Legacy remote. Now, if you don't have this aux3 button, it's because you're running an older version of the Legacy software. You have to have at least version 1.6. And well, that's good timing. The pop-off valve effect just activated on its own, so there it is. And as you can see, it looks pretty cool. It's on a timer, so it'll shut off after a period of time. Now, I'd like to show you the water scoop spray effect right now, but like I said earlier, you can only activate that effect when the engine is moving. So the last thing we'll do before we move it on out is to demonstrate some of the Crew Talk sound effects.
Border Tower calling the 6005. Might be a few minutes. Watch your signals. Over. Copy that. 6005 out. New York Central 6005. You're clear to proceed. Over. Clear to proceed. Out. And my coal's just about empty. 6005 out. 6005 at Harmon. Clear to pull east. Over. One inbound to get you. Hold for the signal. Copy that. Holding on the ready. 6005 out. 6005 to the block operator. We're 10 minutes past schedule. Still looking for a signal east. Over. You're clear to proceed east. Over. Clear to proceed. Out. This is New York Central 6005. Hold tight down and clear. Over. Roger that. Showing you in the clear at 5:15. Out.
Okay, without further ado, let's go ahead and move it out.
NYC 6005 to the tower. We're marking off. Out.
All right, that about wraps it up for this review. What more can I say? This is a beautiful locomotive and a worthy addition to the Vision line. Now, if you're interested in purchasing one of these, the retail price is right at $1,900. Although if you go through a good Lionel dealer, you should be able to get a little bit of a discount off that retail price. And as always, if you're looking for a good Lionel dealer, try my favorite train store, which is Legacy Station. You can find them on the web at www.legacystation.com or give them a call at 770-339-7780. Anyway, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel. I'm Eric Siegel, and I'll see you next time.